Well, thank you everybody for joining today. We're talking with
Doc Sanders.
Doc Sanders, and what is it you do? So, and you've treated literally thousands of animals in your lifetime.
I would say.
Yeah, big, small,
Right.
somewhere in between, gargantuan, alligator skins, and the whole 9 yards.
Yes.
Yep. So, well, today we're going to talk about two stories, right?
Yes.
Two stories from your book.
Exactly.
And you wrote a book called Beyond the Barn.
Right.
And it's the stories of 56 years of being a veterinarian. Right?
Yes. And the title is Beyond the Barn, Dodging the Cow Patties for 50 Years by a Country Vet.
And you successfully dodged all of them? You never stepped in a cow patty?
No, but I actually one time had a cow hit me in the ear with diarrhea.
Oh. You came right in and sat down for dinner, didn't you? Oh, man. Yeah, I know how that's like when they cough and yeah. Working around large animals, you just never know what to expect.
Exactly.
So speaking of working around large animals, our two stories today.
Right.
One of them is about working with large animals, working with a placenta and rhubarb, right?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody who's on, you got to stop what you're doing. You got to listen to this because this is hilarious. So bear with us for a few minutes there. Just stop what you're doing for a minute. Listen. Okay. So Doc, this is my favorite story.
Okay.
That you tell. And this is all true.
Right. Every bit of it.
So you were taking care of a vet one day, or taking care of, well, go ahead, you tell the story.
Well, basically I was scheduled to deworm a group of heifers, Holstein heifers.
That's cows.
Yeah, that's female cows. Besides pregnancy examining, deworming them, and taking care of anything else they needed. And there was about 25 of them or so. And I was
This cattle farm or dairy farm?
This was a dairy farm, but we were at the heifer rearing facility, which wasn't a part of the main part of the barn.
Okay, gotcha.
And scheduled this, and I asked him if he had a cattle chute to restrain the cows so that we could readily pregnancy check them and that sort of thing, and he didn't. And so I had him come by my clinic and pick up. I had a portable cattle chute to take to the farm and set it up, and I was to be there at 1 o'clock. And at 12 o'clock, and this is his, at 1 o'clock I was to be in the western side of Champaign County.
About 20 miles away, maybe more than that.
Well, not from here, but probably 15 mile away. And then I was figuring on, being there on time. Well, at noon, I got a call from a very valued client in the east end of Champaign County. And he had a heifer or a cow trying to calve and wanted assistance, which is an emergency.
Yeah.
And so I had to not go to where we were going to pregnancy check heifers, but go to the east side of Champaign County to deliver the calf. And it was going to make me late getting to the heifers to pregnancy.
And this was the day before cell phones.
Yes, it was before cell phones.
Yeah, so you had radio communications with right. With your home office,
right?
Where your wife was veterinarian also.
Yes. And so I went to take care of the cow calving, and I had my secretary call and tell Dave, my client, that wanted a heifer's pregnancy check, that I'd be running a little bit late because of an emergency. And so I went to eastern Champaign County to take care of the heifer, and it kind of was a false alarm, because I think if the owner had given the cow another hour, she'd have delivered the calf on her own. But I'm there, so what you do is you hold the calf in until you can get the obstetrical chains on his legs, and then it takes a lot of traction to pull a calf. I mean, it's generally a two-person job to get a hold of the chains and pull the calf out. But this can happen fairly easily. The bad ones, you might spend an hour or two doing this procedure.
Or worse, as we've talked about
in
previous stories.
Right.
Yep.
And in this instance, the calf came right out, and the owner was happy. And so I cleaned my equipment up and got everything done like that, and headed back to the west side of Champaign County. And my wife, Dr. Judy, had packed me some lunch. And so I decided I wanted to eat my lunch. I was getting hungry, and it was about 1 o'clock. So, and it was January the 5th. I can even still remember the date of when it happened. The roads were slushy from snow the previous day and slippery. And so you really have no business driving very fast, although I will confess that never slowed me down very much. And
well, I'll have to say you're a pretty good driver. A year ago, when we were coming home from a dairy farm, you could have lost it on a curve getting off the freeway, but you didn't. You did a great job on that. But anyway, I digress. You didn't spin out.
So I'm hungry, and it's going to be a 20-minute drive, and I'm thinking I got time to eat my lunch, and Judy had a sandwich in there, and one of my favorite things was rhubarb stew. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you have had rhubarb pie, which is absolutely delicious. But in essence, rhubarb stew is basically like eating pie filling. I mean, they put enough sugar in that it's relatively sweet and that kind of thing. And so I'm driving on these snow-covered roads back across the county, and I open my rhubarb stew and I eat it while I'm driving, put it away. And the thing is, I pull into Dave's, and he's visibly agitated that I wasn't there on time, which we had called him and said I was going to be late, but he was always a guy, he was a stickler about being on time.
Yeah, well, so the cows didn't mind.
No.
He just did.
Yeah.
But you got him. You got him, didn't you?
Well, I got there and I said, I knew he was agitated, so I decided to confuse him a little. And I said, do you want me to use a deworming agent that'll give L4 larva of Ostratagia? And which I knew that would, put him back on his heels a little bit, because he obviously did not know what Ostratagia was. And
well, I don't.
L4 larva. Well, it's the medium brown worm. It's a parasite in cows and sheep and that sort of thing.
And some humans?
They can.
So if any of our humans have Ostratagia, raise your hand and let us know. All right?
Yes.
Well, we'll move on.
Okay. So I get there and I'm thinking up all this reasons I had, or excuses of why I wasn't there. And he's not paying any attention. And he's looking at the front of my coat, and I looked, and he said, what have you been doing, Doc? And I looked at the same instant that he had looked and seen it, and here I'd spilled a glob of rhubarb stew on my jacket, on my parka. And he said, well, you got some on you. And I said, oh. And I take my lips down and licked it off. Oh, he about died. He got green.
Because he thought it was placenta from a cow.
Yes, he thought it was placenta from a cow. And he got green, and he went over and leaned against the barn and kind of had the dry heaves.
Because he thought you ate placenta from a cow off your coat.
Yes.
And in reality, it was rhubarb pie.
It was rhubarb.
Rhubarb stew.
Yes.
Which looks just like it.
Yes.
Well, I'm not sure many of our audience have seen cow placenta, which is red and
red and maybe a little greenish cast to it.
Yeah,
and that sort of thing.
Well, you generally don't make a habit of eating placenta, do you?
I never have.
No. Well, I hope none of our audience eats placenta either, because that's kind of gross. So
it took a while. For him to kind of recover, and I went around behind the truck because I was busting a gut. And I wasn't about to let on for him to figure out he'd been had. Well, eventually he figured out he'd been had. And so he came around and said, well, come on, let's get busy.
So this is a true story. The guy thought you ate placenta, and it was actually just rhubarb stew.
Yes, exactly.
That's a great story. Well, you got another story for us today, right? Yeah. And this is from your book, right?
Yes.
And your book is called
Beyond the Barn, Dodging the Cow Patties for 50 Years by a Country Vet.
And you're a country vet, and you've been dodging cow pies, except when you got a little on your ear one day.
Yes.
Well, hi, Ruby. So, Ruby's liking to get right in the middle of the story too.
So the thing is, sit down, Ruby. Sit down. Now stay there. The thing is that basically Judy and I built a tremendous business because of one thing. Well, number one, we practice high quality medicine. But the big issue with people called me is you could call us 24 hours a day and we answered the phone. And if we need to come see your cow, why
Or your
we'd
donkey,
go at 3 o'clock
or your
in the
horse,
morning, or your horse,
or your
your
pig,
sheep or pig, or if it's your dog, we'd meet you at the office.
or cat.
Yes, and I got a dog story to tell.
Oh, well, let's do that one too.
Have we got time for?
Yeah, sure. We got time.
Okay.
We got a great crowd here. So hang out. We just got done telling a story about Doc eating placenta, but it wasn't placenta.
Right. It was
And
rhubarb.
the farmer thought it was placenta, but it was rhubarb stew, which looks like placenta.
Yes.
But you don't eat placenta.
No.
Okay.
No,
and probably not a good idea to eat placenta either.
No, I wouldn't recommend it.
No, doesn't sound very applicable,
Yes.
especially raw.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, the flies and all that. You know.
So on another weekend, I get a call from Lee on a Sunday evening, about 5 o'clock, and he's got a small herd of cows that he's actually a hired hand, and his owner has 2 herds, and so Lee milks one of them, and the owner milks the other one on different farms. And Lee's farm is kind of junky, and the equipment's old and this sort of thing. But Lee is kind of
sorry.
Lee is kind of, well, he's Kentucky bred, and my wife would shoot me if she heard me saying that.
Southern Ohio bred. Right.
Well, yes, and
there's like sister brother kind of involved, something like that.
Yes, he had his teeth out. I mean, his false teeth.
He was like 35.
And he's like 35, and he was chewing tobacco.
Oh man, that's lovely.
Yes.
So was he balanced or was he unbalanced?
Well,
you didn't look close enough to know, right?
He became unbalanced before this was done.
So the tobacco leaks out one side of his mouth.
No, both sides. He was level-headed.
He was level-headed. Oh, oh man, that's so gross. That is so gross. So anyway, okay.
So the thing is, he called because he had a cow with a laceration on her mammary gland, on her udder.
Oh, that's utterly awful.
Well, it is, and the other thing is, there's most of them. It's very difficult to repair and get them to heal correctly. And so
very vascular, thin skin.
Yes, and the thing is, the sutures sometimes won't hold, and they often get mastitis or an infection in that part of their udder. Now, a cow's udder is 4 separate compartments in the one bag, if you will.
Yeah.
And
with 4 teets.
Yeah, with
all cows have 4 teats.
Well,
except this one you're going to talk about.
Well, she had them too.
Yeah.
But I've told a story about a 3-titter. That's what they call them, 3-titters.
3-titters.
And
do you know any girls like that?
No, I don't. But
well, that's probably a good thing.
I saw a picture of one like that one time.
A 3-titter. Okay.
Yes.
Well, we'll have to draw that one and share that with the audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Lee calls. He's got a lacerated udder on a cow, and he wants it repaired.
Oh, I'm glad his udder wasn't lacerated. Lee's wasn't.
Yeah, and so I get there, and he puts the cow in. He had stanchions, which meant they put their head in a clamp device that prevented them from backing up or moving around, and they put feed in front of them, so the cow's happy, even though she's got a stanchion around her neck. She's got a delicious food to eat, and that sort of thing. And they're perfectly happy to have that stanchion as long as they got something to eat. And so that was the case with this cow. And so I walked in to this cow, and he had 8 cows, 8 stanchions for cows, and they were 7 of them were full, and there was a space beside the cow that was lacerated. And I looked, and I saw, and it was in the bottom of her mammary gland or udder, and I had never seen a laceration like this before.
And you've seen lots of issues with cows and
yes,
and animals and what have you.
And so, in essence, there was a slit between the 2 teats on that side that was about that long.
Wow.
And
deep, I'm assuming.
Well, and there was tissue hanging out of it.
Oh my.
Big, gaggly, about that long and that big around, and not very healthy looking. It was, matter of fact, it was kind of
Putrefying or a little bit?
Yeah, well, it hadn't gotten that far, but that's where it was headed because it just wasn't good at all.
Okay.
And so I proceeded to keep the cow from kicking, because if you're messing with a sore teat or something like that, they'll want to kick you. And there's a way of putting their tail straight up over their back that they generally don't kick.
And you want to stay out of the way of their sphincter too while you're doing that.
Yes, yeah. Now that wasn't a problem on this cow.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to probe it and look at it, and I just can't believe I've never seen tissue like that hanging out of a teat. And not only that, but it wasn't healthy.
Oh my. So this thing's been going on for a while.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yes.
Well, the cow had to be uncomfortable.
Yes, she was. And her udder was huge.
Oh
just
wow.
a great big udder, like
so. What do you think? Infection or what? Well, you tell us.
Well, I thought she had a lot of swelling in her mammary gland.
Yeah. Well, it's that big. She was just had to be miserable.
Well, and when she walked, she had to walk spraddle-legged. When she did that.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to figure out how long the laceration is, and it looks like it's about that, and this big hunk of tissue hanging out of it. And I thought, I don't know if I can put that back in there. And the more I looked at it, I decided it was so unhealthy I was going to remove it. And I got a pair of scissors to cut it off, and the whole thing fell out of the bottom of the udder. It was a piece about that long.
And they're half again as wide.
Yes. And it literally fell out through that hole, and behind it came 5 gallons of pus.
Oh. Well, being a veterinarian is not for the faint of heart, is it?
No.
And I imagine it wouldn't smell all that great either.
Oh, no. It smelled bad as well.
Oh, no.
And
oh, no. 5 gallons of pus.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, and so that pus. Tissue was just holding it in there.
Yeah, that's right. That's the only reason it hadn't flowed out before.
Well, surprise, Doc. Here.
And this mammary gland went.
With 5 gallons. Oh, my gosh.
I mean, it just totally drained the mammary gland. And Lee, he said, God, Doc, I'm going to be sick. and he goes outside and throws up on the grass outside the stanchion door. And
that's not a luxury you can have, is it?
Yeah, he couldn't handle it.
Did you, and all your travels, have you had one that ever made you sick?
While I was a student,
you had one.
I had one that didn't make me sick, but made me think about it. And that is,
you had some students that got sick from some of them too, didn't you?
Yes, yes.
Because you trained a lot of students. You had a lot of students.
In later years, I became a professor at Ohio State University in the vet school.
And you took students out and trained them in the field. So they got to see all kinds of wonderful things in the field.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And so the thing is that I went out to retrieve Lee, and he was still nauseated. And the udder was like this. And other than him needing to wash all the pus off the floor, the cow didn't need any other treatment, because that bottom drainage on an old chronic wound is a good way to heal them.
So now, did you just leave that open and let it close itself?
I did.
You didn't pack it or anything?
Because if I packed it or sutured
it would just infest.
It would just swell back up,
infester, and kill the cow.
Well, ultimately, it ultimately could, but basically, you want to leave that kind of a wound open and allow it to drain,
and it would knit itself.
Yes, yes.
So did that cow continue to milk, and as far as you knew?
She didn't hardly give very much milk after that.
No.
And so I suspect she wasn't left in the herd by the owner. You remember?
You're in business for milk, and if you got one that's not, it's just a hole in your pocket.
Right.
And better to turn her into human feed than whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, into hamburger,
what have you.
Yeah.
But not the udder.
Right. Right.
That would be utterly ridiculous, wouldn't it?
Yes, exactly.
To turn the cow. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Well, sometimes this channel is not for the faint of heart. So
in the last story, I just escapes me at the moment. What were we talking about?
Oh golly, yeah. So what were we talking about? Well, we talked today. You did the story about today's the gross day. So today we had the story about the farmer who thought you had placenta on your coat, but it's actually rhubarb stew, and you ate it, and he didn't know it. He thought you ate placenta. You
Yeah.
don't eat placenta.
No.
And then we had the story about Lee's utter distress,
Exactly.
where this cow had a laceration.
Yes.
And he pulled out some dead tissue, and 5 gallons of pus come out.
You're right.
Oh my! So
Right.
Do we have a gross story that tops that?
No.
No, not another gross story today.
No.
So wow. So we're almost 30 minutes now, so that's about toward the end of our time. So I want to thank all the several thousand people who've joined us in the last couple of weeks for these stories at 4 p.m. And Doc, you can get this book. Has all kinds of wonderful stories about your lifetime as a veterinarian.
Yes.
And they're all true stories, right?
Absolutely.
And
no made up stories.
Yep. Beyond the barn, dodging the cow patties for 50 years as a country vet. Well, you dodged them, but you didn't. You caught some on the side of your face once,
Yes.
didn't you?
Yes. I caught it in the ear.
Caught it in the ear. So you had an ear full of yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Probably from a cow, not a bull, right?
Right. Right.
It was cow manure, not bull manure.
Do you want to try for another story?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go for another story.
Okay.
Yep. Somebody just said another story. Voted for another story. So.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. The key, Dr. Judy and I started our practice fresh out of vet school.
And that's your wife, and she was a veterinarian too.
Yes, and she was quite a good one.
Oh, she was outstanding. You and Dr. Judy were, I will tell you, are beloved vets in our community. If I mention your name, everybody knows who you are.
Yeah.
In our community.
Right.
So anyway.
So the thing is that the key to our success early on wasn't that everybody knew how great of vets we were.
And you started in 1968.
Yes. It was
a different world.
That they could call and knew that somebody would answer the phone, and if their pet was sick, that we would go to the office and see it.
And it didn't cost tens of thousands of dollars.
No, although we did charge an emergency fee for after hours, but it was like
comparatively not like vet fees are today. You were very reasonable.
$60.
And it was more expensive to go to the hospital then than it was to go to see the vet.
Yes.
Now it's the other way around.
Right.
Which is crazy, but I won't ask you to say anything about that.
Okay.
So anyway, go ahead.
The thing is, we had finished our day and had our dinner and had headed to bed and just getting settled down. And this horse trainer who I knew called that he had an emergency. Now, this horse trainer was always the guy that there's 13 veterinarians in this county, and he only ever called me when none of the other 12 or 11 of them were available. In other words, he made no bones about that he was looking for a better veterinarian than what we were, or he wanted one that was experienced or whatever. But when he couldn't get anybody else, then he'd settle on me coming to the farm or whatever. And so and if I was to tell you his name, everybody would recognize him in quarter horse circles.
Well, I know
for winning at the big shows.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah,
training quarter horses.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the thing is, he calls and says, Janine has her dog is choking, and she's afraid he's going to suffocate the way he's choking. Now, I didn't know he had a daughter by the name of Janine. And I could hear her crying in the background. And so I said, well, I'll come to the office and meet you there. Now, there is an emergency fee. He kind of choked on that, but nonetheless, he said, I'll meet you there. Well, it turned out he didn't come. Janine came. And I met her at the office. And
in the evening after supper.
Well, this is like 10:30 at night.
10:30 at night, okay.
And she had a little Malta poo. That's a cross between a Maltese and a poodle.
I have another name for those, but we'll leave that alone.
Yes. And the thing is, so I went to the office, unlocked the door, got the lights on and everything, and she comes pulling in. Now, this is kind of like Oh, I couldn't believe this. Janine was probably between 25 and 30 and drop dead gorgeous and wearing halter top and short shorts.
And this horse trainer is an older guy.
Yeah, he didn't come. Yeah, he was in his 60s, and this guy was 25 or 30. And
well, he had a checkbook.
Yes,
and it had zeros in it.
Yes, it did.
And they were in front of the decimal point.
Right, right.
Well,
and
there
so
we go.
So the thing is, she brought the dog in, and the dog obviously, and this is typical of those little crossbred dogs like that, they want to bite anybody that they don't trust. And so I had her put him on the table and hang on to him on the exam table. And I told him to hang on to her, that I wanted to take her temperature, the dog's temperature. And so she was okay with that. And she
put the dog up on the table.
Yeah, put the dog on the table. And I reached to twist the dog around so I could take his temperature. And that little sucker reached out and bit me on my thumb. And I go, ouch, and jerked my hand back. And the dog didn't let loose until at the peak of the cycle. So here I am. And the dog flies up and hits the ceiling and lands in the sink, in the exam room, and it turns the water on, and the dog is sitting there going, and he's soaking wet. And Janine couldn't believe what she just had seen. And I was embarrassed. And I said, listen, your dog, I can tell your dog's got tonsillitis. I could tell that from the history of what has tonsillitis, and I'm going to dispense some antibiotics for her that you can put in food for her at home. And I won't give her any shots so that it won't upset her. And just take her home and, take care of her and make sure she gets her pills and that sort of thing. And so she had the farm checkbook, and she was getting ready to write the check. And I said, I didn't realize, the trainer, Bill, I didn't realize Bill had a daughter that was your age and nice a person as you are, and that sort of thing. And she got all embarrassed, and she said, I'm not his daughter, I'm his wife.
So she's got an annoying little dog.
Yes.
You bit the dog bit you. You didn't bite the dog.
No.
The dog bit you. Your arm went up to get rid of the dog, wouldn't let go, and he let go at the apogee.
Yes.
Went up, hit the ceiling, and these are 8-foot ceilings.
Yes.
Bounced off and went into the sink and
landed in the sink.
And turned the water onto the sink.
Yes. And so
and this is the truth. This really happened.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so at that point, she took the dog back to the car and come back in and asked how much she owed us. And I said, you've been such a kind client, and things went kind of rough, and your dog wasn't happy and this sort of thing.
And you were embarrassed.
And I was, yes, I didn't tell her that, and I said, $15 will cover it.
That was a few years ago, wasn't it?
Yes. Well, I would have normally got her for about 60.
Yeah.
And
oh gosh, can you imagine what it'd be today if you took that dog over
300.
to Columbus? Oh, probably more than that.
Yeah.
I think they charge $500 just to see the dog.
Yes, if you go to the emergency clinics, that's true.
Oh my gosh.
So, at any rate, she writes a check for it, and I said, "Now take good care of your dog, and it gets the pills, and she'll be okay."
Yeah.
So she left, and the next morning I'm in there, and Dr. Judy had come in also early because she had a bunch of surgeries scheduled. And she sees that check for $15 on the bookkeeper's desk. And she said, why only $15? If I didn't know better, you met some little hottie in hot pants or whatever, and she charmed you out of charging her a fee.
Well, did you tell her about the dog and all that went on?
No, I did not tell her.
Not until afterwards.
Well, I actually, the phone rang, and I quickly went and answered the phone.
Change the subject, huh?
Yes.
So we told 3 stories today, and these stories are true and from the book.
That's right.
And so the first one is that you had a farmer that thought you were eating placenta off your coat.
Yes.
But it was just rhubarb stew.
Right.
And then the second one, you had this toothless old, he wasn't old, 35,
Yeah.
tobacco chewing
Hillbilly.
hillbilly.
And understand,
I didn't say
I have a
inbred,
lot
but
of good things to say about hillbillies.
yeah,
And including
they're one leg shorter than the other.
yeah, right.
And then we talked about the dog that did a journey to the ceiling and into the sink and got all wet.
Yes.
For $15.
Yes. And my wife giving me a little flack about, why did you only charge her $15? I mean, that should have been $60. And I just said, well, it was a difficult case.
All right. Well, we will be back tomorrow. And thank Doc for running me out. I ran over a bunch of metal in my car at 5 a.m. this morning on my way to another gig. And so thanks for bringing me out so we could do our live broadcast today.
I enjoy telling the stories, as I think most of the people that listen also enjoy hearing them.
We've had in just the last couple of weeks, we've had 13,000 people tune in, and we've had hundreds of people stay and watch. So thank you everybody for hanging out and watching and listening. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because you're trying to sell a book, right?
Right.
And it's called Beyond the Barn, 50 Years as a Veterinarian. You can get it at your website. If you order it from your website, vacaresources.com, VACA resources.com, you'll sign it.
That's right.
And they can also order it on
Amazon.
So, all right. Well, we'll be back tomorrow about 4 p.m. and Friday at 4 p.m. And we'll have more stories from the book and more stories from your life as a veterinarian. Right. You got lots of stories,
right?
Funny stories, sad stories. Yesterday's story was pretty sad.
Yes.
Yep. And wonderful stories and heartwarming stories, but they're all true.
Right.
From 56 years as a veterinarian.
Right.
And even before.
Yes.
Well, there's one story that we haven't talked about. It's not in your book. I don't think so. It's about when you were in college and you ended up getting bent in two underneath a haystack.
Oh, yes.
So we're going to tell that story one of these days here too.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining, and go out and buy a book. Let's see that book again, real. Go buy that book. Doc would appreciate it. And he's got a bunch of them he's got printed. He'd like to sell them.
Yeah.
So you put a lot of money into it. So, okay. Well, we'll see everybody tomorrow. Thanks for joining, and thank you very much. Bye now.